Welcome back to the Not Just Leadership podcast hosted by the Global Institute for Leadership. I'm your host, Dominic, and thanks so much for tuning in once again to another episode. At the Global Institute for Leadership, we're really passionate about equipping and upskilling people with entrepreneurship and leadership skills, and we're doing that through a variety of different programs, the first being this podcast. So we hope it brings you value. We have weekly episodes dropping, and today's episode is on the theme of excellence. And we've talked a little bit in the past about, touching on this topic through other episodes where we've talked about purpose, courage, communication, volunteering, and also interviewed 4 really wonderful, diverse guests so far. And we have more guests joining the podcast throughout the rest of the year and into next year. But today's topic is about excellence. And I guess it's something that's really close to my heart, a topic that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I think is really applicable to the leadership sphere, and it's something that we can apply daily in our lives. So I want to jump into this topic, today, and talk about excellence. This podcast has been a real blessing for me. It's been challenging to deliver a weekly podcast, and I guess find topics that I feel I have something that I can give back and something that I can provide value with. But also, it's been a real growing phase for me. And if any of you have ever done public speaking or interviews or panels or podcasts even, you'll know that it's not necessarily something that's easy or natural. And although people sound natural, or you might think that I sound like this comes easily to me, it's been, I guess, years of practice of saying yes to different speaking opportunities, delivering keynote speeches, emceeing events, speaking on panels both online and in person, delivering workshops abroad throughout the world and here in Australia. And through everything that I do, I try to do it with excellence. That means doing it not necessarily to perfection, but doing it with care, consistency, and conviction. And I truly believe that everything we do, we should do it with excellence. And I think, what does that mean? Let's reflect briefly. I think having a spirit of excellence means giving the best with what you have right here, right now. As I said, it's not about being perfect, but it's about giving your best, using your time, energy, and talents well, really fostering those skills and those abilities that you've been given, really honing in on what your strengths are and applying that in your area of work or in your community to the very best of your ability with a spirit of excellence, doing it to a high level, not necessarily perfect. That's not what it's about, but your best, doing it to your very best. And you'll notice that when you push yourself to do everything with excellence, you'll notice how much more quality you produce through your work, through your volunteering in your life. You notice that when you apply this mindset and you apply this, I guess, philosophy on everything you do, the quality of what you produce is so much higher because you're doing all things to the very best that you can. And it brings you an inner satisfaction. And there's a saying that I've always loved that says, whatever you do, do it with all your heart. So, whether you come from a background of faith or not, I think this idea really captures what excellence is really about. It's about bringing your heart into everything you do. It's about not leaving anything to waste. It's about not leaving anything to chance, but it's about bringing your very best each and every day. And so I'm going to share a little bit about, a couple of stories I have where I've tried to apply this practice and how we can cultivate a spirit of excellence in everyday life. So I see excellence as a form of stewardship and service. And doing excellence is doing things well. So it's not doing things for recognition, but because how we do things reflects who we are. And so it's not about always being the best, and maybe doing excellence for you does mean that you're the best at that talent that you have. It's not to take away from being the top in something, but at the core of it, that's not what it's about. Not about being the best at something, but it's about doing your best. And as I said, you'll notice that when you do your best, the output that you produce is of such a higher quality than what you could have if you'd only given 80, 70% or done something half-heartedly. So it's about being faithful with what's in your hands, with what the talents you have, with the abilities you have, and cultivating those and growing those as you go along throughout your life. We even see, historical figures in the Bible, such as Daniel. He was described of having an excellent spirit, and he was far from perfect, but he carried himself with integrity, diligence, and he gave purpose in every task that he completed. And so I think there's a lot of lessons we can take into leadership in today's world, in our modern globalized world, where increasingly you see people across all stages of life and across all areas of life, maybe trying to cut corners, trying to do things quickly, which is great. It's great to do things quickly as long as you do them properly. But people who cut corners, people who try to rip you off, people who lie and manipulate, that's not excellence. That doesn't bring about good results. It might give you a financial benefit in the short term doing those things, or it might buy back a little bit of your time if you cut corners. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to come back and redo that task, or you're going to be called out for it and face other consequences. So having this mindset of excellence and doing things with excellence is about stewardship. It's about stewarding and developing our talents and skills. It's about how we handle things when they're entrusted to us. When you're given responsibilities, when you're given tasks, when you're given a job, how do you handle that? How do you steward that and develop that role? Whether it's a big role or a small role, whether it's a big task or a small task, how do you go about doing that and how do you approach it? What's your mindset? Are you there to do your best, or are you there to do it quickly and get it done and move on to the next thing? So if the way you do something today reflected your values to the world, would you still do it the same way? If the way you do something today reflected your values to the world, would you still do it the same way? So let's think about how we're journeying through life and what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. Are those things reflective of our values? So should we continue to do it that way, or should we think about, okay, I need to reset. I haven't been giving my best to my job. I haven't been giving my best to my family. I haven't been looking after myself physically and doing the best I can physically and mentally. And so let's reflect our values to the world through our actions. I want to share a little bit of story with you about doing small things with heart. When I was about 13 or 14 years old, so over 10 years ago now, I started a small cleaning business. And it was a way to earn extra money to pay for my ballet training that I was doing at the time. I was trying to pursue a high level of ballet training. And as I was in my teenage years, I was doing a specialized program specifically for male ballet dancers. And it was incredibly expensive. So I was contributing to the costs of that through my cleaning business that I established. And, it might sound like a simple job. It might sound like a boring job. It might sound like something that's not important. But for me, I took that responsibility very seriously. I had a number of clients in my local area that I would drive to their house and clean on a weekly or fortnightly basis. And I designed a logo. I called the company Dom's Domestics. My name's Dominic, so Dom's Domestics in the sense of doing domestic household tasks. And I had social media. I wrote little cards to my clients with updates with my logo on it. I really tried to do everything with the spirit of excellence. And when you clean someone's house, you obviously need to allocate a certain amount of time for it. You need to know whether it's weekly or fortnightly, and obviously you've got to negotiate with the client to see what they want and what's their budget. But everything I did during those times of cleaning people's houses, I really tried to clean to the very best of my ability. I know it might sound funny, it might sound simple, but I think those are our formative years where this is something we can cultivate and develop. And maybe if you didn't necessarily have that mindset when you're younger, it's something that we can still apply later in our career or into our later years of life. It's not something that we should ever give up on or ever forget about. And if it's something that we haven't been practicing throughout the past years and throughout our lives, it's something that I think you should put into practice now, because you'll notice that in everything you do, it brings you such a level of satisfaction and personal accomplishment when you know that things that you have done well and you have done to your best ability. So no one might have noticed that I, went the extra mile to clean the little, dirt in the corner or scrub the toilet. And maybe the client did notice. Maybe they had attention to detail and checked on my cleaning. And sometimes, I got feedback on how I could improve. And I always took that on and tried to improve. But it's about noticing those details yourself and how you work when no one else is watching. So I think that's something really important that we can really reflect on and think about. What do we do when no one's looking? Are we giving it our best? And then there's a time for rest and there's a time for taking a break. That's healthy and that's living a balanced life. But when there's a time to work, we're working and we want to produce our very best. And there's a biblical parable as well, for those of you who might have read this before, in Matthew 25. And it's the story that isn't about money, but it's about trust. When we're given something like a gift, a skill, or an opportunity, and how excellence is something that we can do to honor that. So I believe excellence multiplies our impact. I believe that when we give our best, even in the small things, it opens the door to greater influence, greater purpose, greater networks. And people notice. People notice those who do things well. And I've been fortunate to receive that recognition throughout the past few years, through different awards, through different private messages and emails I receive, through promotions, through new opportunities and experiences, because people notice. And even though it might seem like no one's watching, people are. There's always someone looking. And so how do we go about our tasks privately and publicly? How do we approach them is really important, because it ultimately opens up new opportunities. And, if you're in a job, if you're in an organization or a community group, who are you going to give the extra responsibilities to? You're going to give it to someone who you know will complete it well and will complete it on time and thoroughly. And so that person then has new opportunities to upskill, maybe have new opportunities to earn more money, have new opportunities to meet new people. That could open an abundance of doors in the future. So as I mentioned, it's not about perfection. It's about being faithful and stewarding, doing the very best with what we've been given. So I want to talk a little bit about turning these standards and these expectations into habits, and a few practical ways that we can live with excellence and live out this spirit of excellence. I've got four simple points here that I want to share with you. Number one is to be intentional. So in everything we do, come into it with meaning, not rush, and give attention to details. Be intentional in everything we do. I think why would you do something if you're not fully present and fully there in the moment and not with the right intentions to participate in that activity? Number two is being consistent. I talk about this a lot, and this is, it might sound cliche, but it's actually something that you can tell a lot of people struggle with consistency, because the most consistent are the most successful. If you look at those people who have set up successful businesses, those people who have had successful careers, they've been consistent over a number of years, if not decades, multiple decades, consistently applying themselves to that area of work. And in my podcast, I'm trying to be consistent as well, delivering a weekly episode that I publish on a Sunday, Australian time. And it's not easy. But you notice as you start to develop this habit, that it almost becomes second nature. You're like, okay, Sunday, my podcast is launched, my podcast is released. I either pre-record it or I film it that day and release it. And so consistency develops excellence through this routine, not just in the highlights of life and not just in, the fun times and the travels and the good times, but also in the routine, developing this habit of excellence and consistency. The third way to live out the spirit of excellence in our lives is to be humble and to truly serve others in what we do. And I think when you're doing everything with excellence, you're ultimately doing something that's bigger than yourself. You're doing things for your faith, for your community, for your family, and do these things with humility, because no one likes a cocky or arrogant person. There's a difference with having confidence. I encourage people to build your confidence. I try to be confident in what I do, but humility is something we all need to work on. None of us are perfect at this, and it's something that we can definitely all develop. And so my third point is to be humble, and true excellence serves others. My fourth point about how to live with excellence and how to turn these standards into habits is to be grateful. Because I think when we take a step back and we look at these opportunities that we've been blessed with, we need to take a moment to be grateful for what we have. And once you're grateful and realize the blessings you have, then you're able to come back the next day and do it all again, to your very best. If we lose that gratitude, if we start to become complacent, or we start to complain, we don't necessarily foster this attitude of doing things with excellence. Because if you're not grateful, then what's the point of giving your best? What's the point of doing things to the best of your ability? If you're complacent, if you're comfortable, what's the point of keep trying? If you've already reached the point where you're satisfied and you don't want anything more and you don't care, then why would you do things with excellence? There's no motivation there. There's no inner or outer motivation. And so every opportunity is a chance to practice stewardship and gratitude. In all things I do, whether it's with my youth NGO that I've been setting up and running in the Pacific Islands for the past almost 6 years now, or it's at the Global Institute for Leadership, or it's in my day job, everything I do, I want to do excellence with the small things. Sending emails, making sure they're clear to understand, making sure they're constructive, and whether it's meetings, whether it's completing simple tasks, that's how we build credibility and trust, is through the simple things, through the mundane, everyday things. And so we want to focus an attitude of gratitude to be able to bring this mindset to our work of excellence. And so in reflection, excellence is less about the outcome, and it's more about the attitude we bring to the process. And I think if you bring this mindset of excellence to your activities, I think the outcomes will speak for themselves. It's not about focusing on the outcomes, it's about focusing on the application of yourself in your work. And you'll notice that when you apply this mindset and you apply this attitude, you will just notice how much greater, how much higher quality the results that you produce are. It's something that's just naturally, intrinsically linked to having a spirit of excellence. Because if it's not excellence, then it's not about perfection. Let me be clear, it's not about perfection. But if you think this simple task, if you give your very best to it, you're obviously going to produce a much better outcome than if you just gave 50% or 20% or didn't think about it. There's no way in the world. It's not mathematically possible. If you give your very best, think about it, your very best is much higher than what you're benchmarking yourself against. If you think, okay, I studied for that exam, I got 90 out of 100, I did my best. Did you? Could you do better? Could you have gotten 91? Could you have gotten 92? Maybe you really did do your best, but we've got to be honest with ourselves. We don't want to, let's not lie to ourselves. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's be direct with ourselves and say, okay, did I do my very best? If you did, great. Well done. Give yourself a pat on the back, and take a time to appreciate the result. And then next time, apply yourself in that way again. If you didn't, think about why you didn't. Did you have intention? Did you have consistency? Did you have humility? Did you have gratitude? Let's apply these principles into our daily habits to produce excellence. Continuing on with the podcast, I want to also talk about how excellence multiplies influence, the ripple effect of excellence. And so when one person commits to excellence, it inspires others. I've talked about this through different other topics on the podcast, how I think it was in my podcast on courage, how when we take courage to speak up. When you're in a room and someone speaks up and gives their opinion, you create that environment where other people feel like they can do that as well. Likewise, when you walk into a room and you command the presence of the room and you bring a spirit of excellence, you're creating influence and you're inspiring other people to also show up with that care and with that consistency to set the tone where people feel seen and feel valued. And they're motivated to raise their own standards because of your inspiration and because of the ripple effect and your influence over them. And so it's all about being a light in our field of study, in our field of work, in our community, in our field of volunteering. It's about being a light and being a shining example. And then your excellence becomes a quiet testimony of character and integrity. So continue to do your best, continue to speak up. As I've talked about in other episodes, having the courage, that gives you the strength to begin. Having the purpose, we talked about purpose. Purpose gives you direction. And having excellence, that gives you endurance and impact. You can keep going. You can do it again. You continue to produce these results and this high quality outcome and outputs. So when you work with a spirit of excellence, you're not working for people's applause or recognition, but you're working with purpose. It's because you value what you're doing. It's because you want to set the standard for others and to bring them on this journey. And so in closing and in reflection, I think excellence is definitely strongly linked to gratitude. It's a reflection of gratitude. It's a way of saying, what I've been given, it matters, and I'm going to handle it well. I'm going to use it well. I'm going to steward it well. So I encourage you to find one area of your life this week where you can lift your standard, where it's not necessarily to impress others, but it's to do things with integrity and do things with care. How can we lift our standard in our work, in our community, in our family? A spirit of excellence is doing this. It's simply doing this, doing ordinary things with extraordinary diligence, with purpose, with intention, with focus. And I think it's such a humbling topic and theme. And it's something that's always on my mind. And a lot of people I've been speaking to recently have been asking me, what's my approach to my work and what's my motivation? There's a number of things I've shared with them, but definitely one of them is to steward my talents and to do things with excellence. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to talk for too much longer. I think this has been a nice length podcast. And so I really thank you for joining us on the Not Just Leadership podcast, hosted by the Global Institute for Leadership. I hope you come back next week. We've got a wonderful guest on the show, and throughout the rest of the year, we've got really good themes and guests that we're going to be covering and inviting. And so I thank you so much for your time. I really value you listening in. I hope this session has brought you some value and encourage you in your leadership and entrepreneurship journey. Thanks so much, and see you in the next episode.